If you've paid even a little bit of attention to real estate prices in the Bay Area, you've probably noticed how absolutely unreliable the listing price of a home can be, how regularly homes sell for more, often much, much more than the price they're listed at. And you've probably thought, is the list price completely meaningless? What's going on here? So one topic that seems to unite home buyers and home sellers alike, it makes them equally frustrated, oftentimes confused, is the topic of listing prices for homes. It's completely understandable. So to illustrate it, let's say that you're a first-time home buyer, you're looking to buy a home. You've worked long, hard hours, you've saved up a down payment, and you found a property that fits your needs, and you see the price that's being asked for that property, hey, it fits my budget. You're also the first person to offer. You're there with cash in hand, you have a pre-approval letter, and you offer to buy the property at the listed price. And then the seller completely ignores you, or worse yet, they laugh at you. Here's the flip side of the coin. Let's say you're a middle-class homeowner. You bought your Bay Area home years, decades ago, and you bought it for exponentially less than it's worth now. And you know what it's worth. Your realtor, your agent agrees, yep, this is what the property is now worth. And yet that same realtor is telling you, you need to sell this, list it for much, much less than it's actually worth. Both of these scenarios, they play out every day in the Bay Area, but why? So before we answer that, let's talk a few numbers. Thus far this year, 2/3, 2 out of every 3 homes that have sold in the Bay have sold above listing price. And if you've been shopping in this market and that number seems low, consider that includes all homes, $5 million, $10 million, $15 million homes. And those homes typically, because they're such a smaller buyer pool, they don't sell as much above listing price. But affordable homes, the lower priced homes, that number's way higher than 2/3. In 2020, that number was 47% homes that sold above listing price. So this is hardly a new phenomenon, it's just more pronounced this year. So in the rest of the country this year, about 1/3 of homes, which is very high for the rest of the country, has sold above listing price. Within our market, you're probably wondering, hey, which city has the most homes selling above listing price? It's actually El Cerrito, 92%. The cities with the lowest are Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and Half Moon Bay. Around 38 to 39% of homes in those markets have sold above listing price. But again, remember, particularly in Palo Alto and particularly in Menlo Park, there's a lot of luxury homes in that market, and that's a smaller buyer pool. If you're wondering which county has the most homes selling above listing price, that's actually Alameda County, 71% of homes, and 3% of those have actually sold at least $500,000 above listing price. The most notorious of those is a home in Berkeley. It sold for $2.3 million. It was listed for $1.3 million and it received 29 offers. That's the stuff of headlines. So what's causing this? What's behind this? Well, there's a few factors, but I would argue the most significant is simply supply and demand. The fact is, the overall inventory of homes for sale across the Bay Area is ridiculously low, and it's remained low, well below, historical norms since at least 2014 or 2015. We have, without question, a housing shortage across all price ranges. So part of what you're seeing is simply that there's a lot of people competing over a very scarce commodity, housing. And this commodity, it's especially scarce in a specific class of housing, and that is single-family homes in suburban neighborhoods with full-size lots. This is due in part to zoning laws, which often limit the type of construction in those neighborhoods to typically single-family construction, so you couldn't build a multi-unit apartment complex, for instance. But it's also due to COVID. Not just COVID, but some of the government responses to COVID, and more specifically, corporate responses to COVID, like being able to work from home. What that's done is it's opened up markets that people would not consider living in before. Then you saw even just a year ago when workers at a lot of the big tech companies would look at having to commute 5 days a week back then, and now they could telework from home a majority of the week. Now, it's no secret that when you have less supply and more demand, prices rise. But sometimes they rise to levels that have never even been contemplated or imagined by the seller or by anyone in this industry, simply because there have been periods where there are so few homes. Buyers in those periods are something of a captive audience. So when you have buyers that are desperate to buy, either because they've been trying to buy for 6 months and just are tired of getting defeated and they come off of the top rope with a ridiculously high offer, or they have something else going in their life that they have to get in a home. It's not uncommon in times where inventory is 4 or 5 orders of magnitude lower than it should be when you have a desperate buyer like that who pays far more than anyone else looking for the home. And then what does that do? Well, that then becomes a comp. That's a comparable sale that the neighbor is looking at when he or she is selling their house. So supply and demand, and sometimes just buyer desperation, is a huge factor, but it's not fair to put all of this on supply and demand. The fact is, the practice of listing low and selling high, that's been custom in our market for a very, very long time. And there's a very fine line between this practice being on one hand wise and advisable, and between it, crossing over the line to being greedy and unscrupulous. So the phenomenon of homes being listed for much less than they ultimately sell for, that's not new in our market. It's certainly not new in the Bay Area. It's only new in the rest of the country. There's a long history going back to at least sometime before the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, where a majority of affordable Bay Area homes at lower price points, were underpriced. And that was done in part to fuel interest and competition among the buyers. It's tough to say exactly when this practice began, but at some point many years ago, it became so common that it effectively became the rule, not the exception to the rule. Part of this is due to sellers and their agents just not always having the highest degree of certainty or the most confidence where the home's ultimately going to sell, given just how big a disparity there is between eager and willing home buyers and housing inventory. There's just so many more buyers than houses for sale at some of these times. The safer thing to do is often just to list the house a little lower and let the market determine what it's worth. So effectively, for homes outside the luxury home market, this strategy, which again, it's basically just getting people in the door to have an emotional reaction on the house in hopes of eliciting multiple offers, and then over the course of those multiple offers, the market will say what the home is worth. Gradually, that became the norm. Now it's become a self-licking ice cream cone. It's so well known by sellers, it's so well known by buyers, that you're almost doing the seller a disservice if you let them list the home for what it's actually worth. I'll give you for instance. Let's say that Ryan and let's say we're listing a house that we genuinely expect to sell somewhere around $1.5 million. The thing is, if we list that house for $1.5 million, here's what's going to happen. It's going to sit on the market longer, and it's ultimately going to sell for less than had we listed that house at, say, $1.35 million. Buyers at this point, particularly buyers who have been in the market for a little bit of time, they're conditioned. So when they see a home, when they see this home hit the market at 1.5, what they're going to say is, man, it's a nice looking home. I'd probably pay 1.5 for it, but clearly they listed at 1.5, so they must want 1.6 or 1.7 million. And what they're going to do is they're going to steer clear. So whatever you may think about this pricing practice, it's become so common amongst most, if not quite all, but most of the Bay Area cities and markets, that we as agents are doing our sellers a disservice if we don't follow it. You just have to follow the trends. Here's the thing. Let's slightly tweak the facts of that scenario. Let's assume that a realtor, not me or Ryan this time, is listing a house that should sell for, again, $1.5 million. The thing is, it's unfortunately not too uncommon to see some real estate practitioners in that same scenario who will list the home for, let's say, $900,000 or $999,000. Doing that, listing a home that much under what they expected to sell for, that's a practice that I would argue is unscrupulous, and I'd go a little further and say it's even a bit cruel to home buyers in what is already a pretty stressful process and very expensive market. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen too often, but it happens enough. And the people who are doing it, I mean, I'll tell you why they're doing it. They're usually doing it to collect leads, or they're usually doing it just to be able to brag to their client, hey, look how many offers I got. Look at this ridiculously high number of offers, or use it, you know, in a forthcoming marketing push. Whatever the reason, underlisting a home to this extent, it does absolutely nobody any favors, and frankly, it wastes everybody's time. It's something that we don't advocate and something we will never do. So, on that happy note, that's it. Hopefully you have a better understanding of how properties, particularly single-family homes, are priced in our market. And more importantly, hopefully you understand why they're priced that way, whether it's due to supply and demand, whether it's due to just conventions and practices that have become a part of our market for so long that they're ingrained in most people's mindsets, or unfortunately, whether they might be due to just unscrupulous practices by some realtors. We'd ask if you took anything of value from this, please give us a like and subscribe, and that will make it easier for us to keep cranking out videos very similar to this, and it'll ensure that when we do, you're the first to hear about it. Thanks so much for watching.